Stranded in the wilderness, Phyllis and Carla fight against the unforgiving storm. But when hope fades, something far darker emerges. The whispers in the wind aren't from the dead, they're from the desperate souls still trapped, seeking escape. Daniel Blake. Daniel Blake is a seasoned ex-military pilot turned private aviator, owner of a vintage Piper Cherokee. Meticulous and calm under pressure, he values precision and family above all. Haunted by past missions, he channels his survival skills and discipline into protecting those he loves. And loyal son. Rachel Blake. Rachel Blake, 17, studies biology and carries quiet strength born from loss. Daughter of Daniel, she battles her fear of flying and grief over her mother's death, yet remains resourceful, compassionate, and determined. Her keen observation and empathy guide the group through darkness. Strong. Eric Monroe. Eric Monroe, 35, is a passionate nature photographer and longtime family friend. Adventurous and witty, he captures beauty even in chaos. His steady humor calms the trio, while his curiosity and improvisational skills prove invaluable as they navigate danger and isolation in the wilderness. The hum of the engine was steady, slicing through the crisp March air like a needle through silk. Daniel Blake sat upright in the cockpit of his single-engine Piper Cherokee, eyes scanning the horizon beyond the instrument panel. Below them, the jagged ridges of the Bitterroot Mountains stretched endlessly, capped with fresh snow. He'd flown this route dozens of times. But this time felt different. Behind him, Rachel tapped at her phone screen, trying and failing to get a signal. She didn't complain, but Daniel knew she was nervous. She always had been about flying, ever since her mother died during a storm-related car crash 5 years ago. Still, she had agreed to come. That meant something. Eric Monroe leaned into the window, camera resting on his knee. "The light's perfect," he said, more to himself than anyone else. "You don't get this kind of atmosphere anywhere else." He looked relaxed, as always, chasing moments through his lens. The sky had been clear when they left Missoula. But now, thin, fast-moving clouds were gathering. Daniel squinted. The forecast hadn't mentioned any major systems rolling in until evening. Still, the air was shifting, he could feel it. He reached for the radio. "Helena Tower, this is November 36 Zulu requesting weather update." Static. Then silence. Daniel frowned and tapped the radio again. Still nothing. Eric looked up. "Something wrong?" "Probably just the terrain," Daniel lied. Rachel finally looked up. "Dad?" He gave her a quick smile. "We're fine." But outside the window, the first snowflakes had already begun to fall. The storm rolled in faster than Daniel anticipated. Within 15 minutes, visibility had dropped to near zero. Snow hammered the windshield, swirling in chaotic spirals as wind slammed the aircraft from the left. The sun vanished behind thick cloud cover, plunging the cabin into a dim, bluish gloom. Daniel's knuckles whitened on the yoke. "We're diverting," he muttered, more to himself than to Rachel or Eric. "We'll drop altitude, find a visual." Rachel leaned forward. "Are we in danger?" "No," Daniel said. "A lie. But I need quiet." He flipped switches, adjusted the throttle, tried the radio again. Still dead. Eric, uncharacteristically quiet now, pointed to the left. "Is that?" Daniel followed his finger but saw nothing. Just fog and flurries. Instruments were steady, barely. Ice began building on the wings. Suddenly, the altimeter spun faster than it should. A downdraft. Daniel fought the yoke as the plane dropped like a stone. Alarms blared. The artificial horizon wobbled wildly. They were flying blind, and off course. A shape emerged in the white, a ridgeline, too close, too fast. "Brace!" Daniel shouted. Time stretched. The treetops surged up to meet them. Then impact. Metal screamed. Glass shattered. Darkness swallowed the world. When Rachel opened her eyes, the world was still and white. For a second, she couldn't breathe, then the cold hit her like a slap. Her body ached everywhere. Blood ran down her forehead, warm against the frost in her hair. The cabin was sideways. Snow poured through the shattered windows. The smell of fuel was faint but sharp. Her seatbelt was jammed. She fumbled with numb fingers until it gave way, and she fell to what had become the cabin wall. "Daniel," she croaked. A groan answered from the cockpit. She crawled through glass and twisted metal. Daniel was slumped forward, a gash across his temple, blood soaking into his collar. His chest moved, barely. "Daniel, wake up." A rustle from the back. Eric, dazed but alive, blinked at her. "What happened?" "We crashed," she said, breathless. "You okay?" "My leg," he looked down. Blood stained his jeans. "I think it's broken." Rachel's mind raced. No radio. No signal. No clue where they were. Outside, the storm hadn't eased. Snow blew hard against the fuselage. Ice crept in through every opening. They were alone. She pulled a thermal blanket from the emergency kit and wrapped it around Eric. She did the same for Daniel, who was still unconscious. Then she sat between them, arms around both, and listened to the wind scream across the mountain. They'd survived the crash. But could they survive what came next? Rachel tried the radio again. Static. The antenna had snapped in the crash, and the emergency transponder was dead. She tapped the panel like it might miraculously come to life. Nothing. Just the hiss of snow against metal. Daniel stirred. His eyes fluttered open, glazed with confusion. "Where?" "We crashed in the mountains." "You hit your head," she said gently. "Stay still." He tried to sit up but winced, gripping his ribs. "I can't feel my fingers. Frostbite starting." "Keep them close to your body. We need to stay warm." The night came fast. The sun barely touched the peaks before disappearing, and the darkness brought silence so absolute it was maddening. No engines, no birds, just the wind and the groans of the cooling wreck. Rachel inventoried the emergency supplies. 1 blanket left. 2 flares. Minimal food, trail mix, protein bars, a half-empty water bottle. No stove. No beacon. She bit her lip hard enough to draw blood. "We need firewood," she told Eric, who had managed to wedge himself into a seated position. "Can you reach that panel?" He nodded, teeth chattering, and pushed it open. Snow drifted in like smoke. The storm had eased slightly, revealing a skeletal line of trees just downhill. "Don't go far," Eric whispered. She smiled faintly. "I won't." Outside, the snow was thigh-deep. Her boots vanished beneath it as she staggered through the powder. Every branch was a claw. Every shadow moved. She collected what she could, snapped off frozen limbs, and trudged back. She had no matches. Just friction and desperation. And in the darkness of the fuselage, lit only by the flicker of their first fragile fire, Rachel realized how quiet death could be. The first night on the mountain tested them in ways none of them were ready for. The crash had shattered more than metal, it cracked time, comfort, and any certainty that rescue was near. Snow fell steadily, a cold hush swallowing the wreck. The fuselage, tilted and broken, offered little shelter from the wind that screamed like a warning through the trees. Eleanor wrapped her coat tighter around Ava, trying to conserve body heat. Thomas, despite his injuries, had managed to shift some wreckage to block one side of the cabin. His breath came in shallow rasps, every movement laced with pain. They had a few energy bars, a bottle of water, and a bag of dried fruit between them, barely enough for a day. Eleanor began rationing it with clinical precision, her nursing instincts battling the rising panic. Her fingers were numb, and her mind flickered back to her training: hypothermia, frostbite, dehydration. She couldn't let it paralyze her. The radio was dead. No signal. No SOS. Only the wind. Ava scribbled in the margin of her sketchbook by flashlight, her handwriting trembling with cold. Day 1. Snow's still falling. Mom says we'll be okay. I want to believe her. Thomas tried to smile at them, even joked once, something about frozen lasagna, but his eyes betrayed the truth. They were stranded. No one knew where. And the silence outside felt bottomless. Eleanor didn't say it aloud, but she knew, if help didn't come soon, they'd have to try and survive much longer than a single night. By morning, the snow had buried half the fuselage. A thin gray light crept through the cracks in the cabin, revealing the frost on their clothes, the condensation frozen along the metal walls. Eleanor checked Thomas's side. His ribs were swollen, his breathing shallow but steady. He nodded faintly, trying to sit up, but a spike of pain forced him down again. Ava's fingers were purple from the cold, but she hadn't said a word about it. She just stared outside, her sketchbook forgotten on her lap. "We have to do something," she whispered. Eleanor knew. They couldn't just wait. The food would be gone in 2 days, maybe less. She looked at the torn map Thomas had kept in his flight bag. It was water-damaged, parts unreadable, but enough to guess where they might be: somewhere in the Trinity Alps, west of Reading. Too many miles. Too much terrain. Ava offered to go, just to scout a little. Eleanor refused immediately, but the girl didn't back down. "I'm not hurt," she insisted. "You need to stay with him." In the end, they compromised. Ava would climb to a ridge just above the crash site and return before sunset. She layered every scrap of clothing they could spare and wrapped her feet in torn insulation. Before leaving, she looked back once, then vanished into the trees. The day crawled. Thomas drifted in and out of sleep. Eleanor counted every minute, ears straining for footsteps. When Ava returned, face flushed and boots soaked, her voice shook, "I saw tracks, not animal. Someone was out there." Eleanor's heart skipped a beat at Ava's words, but she quickly steadied herself. "What kind of tracks?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Ava didn't answer immediately. She was panting from the climb, her face pale beneath the layers of frost. She pulled her coat tighter around her body, her teeth chattering as she finally spoke. "Human tracks. And they were fresh, not more than a day old." The words hit Eleanor like a jolt of electricity. There was a chance, just a slim chance, that someone was out there. That they weren't completely alone. "Did you follow them?" Eleanor asked, though she already knew the answer. Ava shook her head, her eyes wide. "I couldn't. The snow was too deep, and I wasn't sure where it would lead. But I know, they were there." Her voice trailed off, and her gaze turned distant as if she could still see the faint outlines of the tracks in her mind. Eleanor's mind raced. They couldn't just sit and wait. They had to find those tracks. If someone was out there, they could help. But the decision was heavy. Thomas was in no condition to move, and Ava wasn't ready for the journey on her own. They needed more supplies, more warmth, and more time. It was then that Eleanor noticed the change in Thomas's breathing. It was rapid now, shallow, his skin clammy with a cold sweat. "Thomas," she whispered, kneeling beside him, panic rising in her chest. She felt his pulse, a faint, thready beat. Eleanor looked to Ava. "We need to go now. You'll be fine. You have to be." Ava nodded, the fear in her eyes hidden by resolve. "I'll find help. I promise." With that, she strapped on her makeshift pack, checked her boots, and disappeared once more into the snow-covered forest, leaving Eleanor to care for Thomas, and hope they weren't too late. The wind howled outside, the flurries of snow clawing at the walls of their shelter. Eleanor sat beside Thomas, her fingers trembling as she pressed a damp cloth to his forehead, trying to bring his fever down. His breathing was shallow, erratic, and each exhale seemed to echo in the heavy silence. Her thoughts kept drifting back to Ava. The girl had been gone for hours now, and the relentless storm didn't show signs of easing. It felt like time itself was warping in the cold, dragging each minute into an eternity. Eleanor had tried to keep herself busy, collecting more snow for water, stacking the remaining firewood with meticulous care. But her mind wouldn't stop spinning. The image of Ava disappearing into the white, leaving her alone with Thomas, weighed heavily on her chest. She wasn't sure how long she could keep this up. The food was running low, the fire's warmth dimming as the storm grew fiercer. There was little left to do except wait and hope, but hope was starting to feel like a cruel joke. Thomas's condition was deteriorating fast. His face had taken on a sickly pallor, his lips cracked and dry. Eleanor held his hand, hoping the contact would offer some comfort, but it was as though he were slipping away from her with every passing moment. She whispered his name, trying to rouse him from his fevered stupor. "Thomas, come on, stay with me. We'll make it out of here. You have to fight." His eyelids fluttered, a faint groan escaping his throat. Eleanor's heart leaped, but the brief moment of clarity faded quickly, and he drifted back into unconsciousness. The thought of losing him, of being alone in this bleak, frozen world, sent a wave of panic crashing through her. What if Ava didn't come back? What if no one else was out there? She closed her eyes, squeezing Thomas's hand tighter. They couldn't give up. Not yet. Days dragged on, the winter storm showing no mercy as the family continued to fight for survival. Carla and Phyllis huddled together in the wrecked plane, wrapped in layers of clothing and sheets they had managed to cover the broken windows with. But even this small barrier did little to shield them from the biting cold. Their food was nearly gone, and the last of the water had been melted from the snow. Alvin, bruised and battered, had no choice but to try once more to leave the wreck. His body ached with each step, but the thought of his family starving in the snow pushed him forward. He had to find help, had to find something. But the deeper into the mountains he ventured, the more the storm seemed to consume him. The snow grew heavier, blinding, and the cold became a numbing weight against his bones. He thought of his children, of Phyllis, and what they might be going through back at the wreck. But he couldn't stop. Not now. He knew that the search was still ongoing, but with each day that passed, he feared it was all but futile. Hours passed, then days, and Alvin was nowhere to be found. His family was losing hope, but they clung to the memories of their father, his strength, his will. Yet as the storm raged on, the cold became unbearable. With each passing day, it was clear that survival was no longer a certainty. Phyllis and Carla could only wait, praying for a miracle that was slowly slipping away. The storm had finally subsided, but the wreckage of the plane was a haunting reminder of the lost souls who had endured so much. Phyllis and Carla remained in the wreck, but the fire that once burned bright within them had long since flickered out. The cold, the hunger, and the isolation had taken their toll. Days blended into one another, the passage of time felt like an eternity. Hope was something that had slipped from their grasp, replaced by the silent understanding that they were alone now. Alvin had never returned, and the search efforts had dwindled. What little hope they had once clung to had faded, leaving them in a bleak, almost surreal acceptance of their fate. The wind howled through the remnants of the aircraft, its mournful cry a stark echo of the lives that had been lost. As Phyllis sat near the shattered window, her eyes distant and unblinking, she thought she heard it, a faint whisper on the wind. She closed her eyes and pressed her hands against her ears, as if to shut it out, but the sound persisted. It was Alvin's voice, or something like it, calling to her, a fading echo lost in the vast wilderness. Carla, her face pale and worn, finally turned to Phyllis, seeing the distant look in her sister's eyes. They had said all they could say, lived through all they could endure. There was no way out anymore. The snow began to fall again, gentle but insistent, covering the wreckage like a final shroud. The echoes of the past, their lost hopes, their dreams, faded into the whiteout, and with it, the last remnants of a story that had once been filled with life. In the end, only the wind and the snow remained, whispering their stories to the mountains.